Hello everybody, today we're going to be talking about the elements of design. So the elements of design are line, form, space, mass, texture, and color. Now we've already talked about color in class. Because color is so important to interior design, we talked about that on its own. And now we're going to look at the rest of the elements of design. Elements of design are used by designers to plan and evaluate and describe their work. So as they are making the plan of what they're going to do with the design of a room, they use these elements of design to make it flow and look nice together. And then as they're describing their work to their clients, they also will use these elements of design. So let's start with line. Lines are formed when 2 points are connected. And so that can be an actual line that you follow with your eye, or it can be looking across a shelf or a piece of furniture. Lines show direction. It's going to make your eye follow that line. And so as your eye moves along that line, it's going to cause different feelings and emotions and visual effects. So the types of lines, you have straight lines, and you have straight lines would be horizontal that are parallel to the ground, vertical that are perpendicular to the ground, and then diagonal. So with this picture, you can see across the ceiling you have your horizontal lines, the vertical lines in the pillars on the left, and there's definitely some zigzag diagonal lines on the floor. And then you also have curved lines. So there's some curve in the sides of the corners of the room as the lines are coming up the wall and across the ceiling. Each creates a different emotional response. How do you feel about this room in the picture? Seems a little bit much. So sometimes overuse of lines can be a little hard to handle on the eye. All right, so let's talk about horizontal lines first. They are parallel to the ground, like I said, and it directs your eye across the space. So if you look at the picture here, the horizontal line is making your eye look across the wall. Now the painted lines in that wall, or wallpaper maybe, they're going to make the room seem wider. Because your eye is following it across the space, it'll seem like it is longer. The other line here is the line of the table or the benches there. Your eye will follow it along the top of the bench or along the top of the table. And so that will create a horizontal line as well. Horizontal lines tend to have a peaceful, relaxing, calm, restful feeling. It's associated with the sunset and the horizon, or you lay horizontally in your bed at night when you want to lay down and relax and sleep. The next type of straight line is your vertical lines, and they're perpendicular to the ground. And so you have a lot of vertical lines in this picture. The columns definitely give a very thick perpendicular line, and so that tends to make your eye look up and down. It's going to make the ceiling from floor to ceiling seem taller. So it gives that sense of height. Like I said, your eye looks up that line, and so it's going to make it seem like there's more space, or it's higher from floor to ceiling. It's also a feeling of strength. So those pillars definitely make it feel like they're very strong and sturdy. There's a formality to it. This room, it does seem very formal, probably for more reasons than just your lines. The pillars give it that very formal feel as well. And then a stability. The pillars they're strong and they are going to hold up, and so that gives that stable feeling as well. And then you have diagonal lines, and they're an angle between your horizontal and vertical. And depending on how slanted they are or how many zigzags and diagonals you have. Like in this picture, there's a lot of different diagonals in that zigzag. You're going to get more of a feeling of energy, again, depending on that degree of the angles. And of course, the number of angles. So there's a lot going on in that design in this room. And then you have curved lines. And so the curved line is a part of a circle. The circular curved lines have a softer feel than those straight lines. You have a curved couch, and you have the circles of the end tables and the coffee table in this picture. And so it's a little bit more softer of a design than if you would have very straight lines for both of those. They reflect organization. A full circle is going to be very organized because you have that perfect round circle. It's also associated with eternity because it doesn't have the endpoints in the circle. And it's very uniform to be able to have that perfect circle. Slightly curved lines, so if it doesn't complete itself and make that full curve, kind of like the couch is a partial curved circle there. It creates a soothing, kind of a flowing movement. Kind of thinking waves are that curved lines, and kind of a very flowing movement of that. They communicate a soft, free, open feeling to the room. The next element of design is form, and it's any physical shape an object takes. So it outlines the edges of any three-dimensional object. Like in your picture, you've got the couch and the chairs. It's the outline of those. It contains volume and mass, and so it is that three-dimensional form or shape. It also has height and width and depth. Now let's talk about the types of form. There's realistic form, there's abstract, geometric, and free form. So let's talk about the realistic form first. If you look at this picture, you can tell that that's a couch, and there's you can tell what the picture is of a tree and nature in the background. You've got the lampshades, and everything is recognizable because a realistic form is that traditional, familiar feeling. It's something when you look at it, you know what it is. It's, like I said, it's recognizable. It's something that when you look at it, you can see and you can tell really know what it's supposed to be. Now, abstract, on the other hand, is going to take that recognizable object and it's going to reformat it. It's going to rearrange it. In the picture, you've got two couches. They're not the traditional couch look. They've been kind of rearranged, and it's almost like a jelly bean type shape to the outside of it. So you have those traits. You know it's a couch because it's got, you can tell there's that seat for the seating area. It's got a back, it's got some legs, but it doesn't really have that recognizable couch shape. It's a more contemporary look. It's definitely associated with a more creative, artistic feeling to a room. Very different than your traditional realistic forms. And then there's geometric forms. That's when you use geometric figures in your design. So in this picture, you've got square pillows. The couch is very rectangular. You have the background has some very rectangular straight lines and forms there. There's the circles of the vases in the corner. And so it communicates order. It's organized. There has to be planning to use a lot of those geometric shapes in the forms. And then the last type of form is free form. Free form is kind of a random flowing shape. And so if you look at this picture, the coffee table it's not that perfectly round or square coffee table. It's more of, it looks like you took a tree and you kind of took a cross section of it and you used that as your coffee table. So it's more of those shapes you'd find in nature that you could use with that free form. It's not as predictable. Everything's not the perfect same shape. If you go outside, every leaf is maybe a little bit different. Every rock is shaped a little bit different. And that's kind of the basis of that free form. It communicates kind of that freedom because it has some different shapes and movement to the sides of that form. Now, when you're using form in design, there's some things that you really should remember. Form follows function. So if you want something to be very functional, a lot of times that realistic form is made that way because it works. And so if you have that abstract couch, if we go back to that kind of jelly bean shaped abstract couch, it may not be as comfortable and as livable as you might like that typical realistic couch to look like or to feel like. So you have to think of that function. Is it something that you just want it to be something you can look at and possibly use sometimes, or do you want that comfort level? Related forms tend to be more agreeable than unrelated. So if you use a lot of realistic forms and then you throw something abstract in there, sometimes they don't agree real well. A gradual change is also easier on the eye. So if you have things that are different forms, you may want to have a gradual change and not a very stiff change from one room to another. And then we'll talk about space. Space is your area in or around a form. And so you do have to consider the size of the space that you have to work with. So basically thinking with this would be the size of your room that you're using to base your design around. You only have so much space to work with. The size of the room is going to affect how it's used. If it's a very small room, you may not be able to use it for dual purposes like a dining room and an office. It limits what you can do. Now let's talk about the two different types. You have a large space and you have small spaces. Very large spaces can be very open. They have a sense of freedom. They can be very grand if you have a huge house or you walk into a big grand hotel. You're walking into a very large space and it can have that grand feeling. And those are all positive feelings. Now you can also have some negative feelings associated with a large space. Sometimes in an extremely large space, you can walk in and feel really lost or really small. And they can be overwhelming. Maybe think of walking into a huge stadium. It's huge, it's overwhelming, there's lots of seats. And so that you can kind of feel lost in that big area of that room. Now, small spaces can be very cozy. They're small, they're intimate, they can have a comfortable feel depending on how it's used, but you don't have a lot of space to work with. So the more you put into that space, the more crowded it can feel. So you really have to work with that smaller space to maybe open it up and make it not feel so crowded and cluttered. The one in the picture, you have that wall, that bedroom, and it's obviously very small because you have very little room around the bed. The more you try to put in there, or the more decorations maybe are on the wall, the closer and more confined it might feel. Now, as you're using space, if you have a small space that you want to open up, mirrors, because the reflection can help open up a space and make it feel bigger. If it's really small, if you are the home improvement remodeling type, maybe as long as it's not a load-bearing wall that could cause damage to the house, maybe you open up some of the walls so that you have an actual bigger space. Another way to visually open up a room is to clear the areas around the windows. So having the extra light can help open up and make a space feel larger as well. And then if you have a very large space that you want to make it feel smaller and cozier, you can divide it up into different areas. So maybe you have a dining room area and a living room area. And it's good to use area rugs to help bring those spaces together and define what they are. So maybe thinking of more of like an open floor plan. And if you don't organize that very well, and you don't bring those smaller areas together that you've divided out, sometimes it can feel very unorganized or confusing. And that's why sometimes using like an area rug to kind of ground the arrangement and bring those furnishings together can make it feel a little more defined. All right, next one is mass. And mass either refers to the amount of pattern in an area or the amount of objects in a space. It can also be how crowded or empty a room looks. So we have two types of mass. We have high mass and low mass. So let's talk about high mass first. If you look at this picture, there's a lot in this room. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of decorations, there's a lot of furniture, and that's basically a high mass room. It's visually crowded. Like I said, there's a lot to see and a lot for the eyes to take in. Now, it could also be a fabric that has a lot of pattern to it. If you look in the picture, the rugs have a lot of pattern, so it would be more of a high mass pattern to those rugs. And then, like I said, this room has a lot of objects in it, a lot for the eye to look at, and that would be a high mass area as well. It can feel crowded or cluttered depending on how you design and how you arrange those different furnishings. But it can also give it a formal feel, again, depending on how it's used. Fabrics tend to feel weightier if there is more visual patterns to it. And then you have low mass. And low mass is a very simple space. It's simple, it's sparse, there's not a lot to look at. When you're looking at furnishings in a room, it's kind of that minimalist look that you're only putting the essential furnishings in that room. So in this bedroom, you have a bed, but there's no extras. You don't have end tables, you don't have a chest or a dresser or anything else. There, in that picture, you've really just got the basics. It's a very clean, airy look. You don't have the clutter of all this stuff sitting around. Now, as you're using mass in design, mass can definitely create a very strong statement. Either high or low mass. Having a lot of stuff in a room or a lot of pattern to a fabric is going to have a very strong statement. It can be a good statement depending on how it's done and how it's designed. And again, a very low mass room, if you can get away with only the essential furnishings, is also a very strong statement. Depending on how you can use it, sometimes blending that high mass and low mass can add some variety. So maybe you have a low mass room where it's just the essentials, but you add a bedspread to the bed that has a lot of design and pattern to help give you a little more variety and make it look a little more interesting. The extremes can complement each other, and so like I said, that can be helpful in helping with your design. Texture is either how a surface feels to the touch. As you run your hand along that surface, you have that rough, bumpy surface of the stone in the fireplace in the picture, or you can tell that the end table would be very smooth glass surface. It's also how it appears to feel. So if you had a picture of a stone walkway, you know that stone is a very rough feel to it in real life, but when you look at the picture, you just have that smooth feeling picture. So our two types of texture is tactile texture, that's the texture you can actually feel, and then the visual texture, that's the texture you see. So the tactile texture is the way the surface feels to the touch. And so with that, you have a lot of variety. You have in interior design, you have stones and bricks and soft pillows and blankets. You have smooth surfaces of glass or marble. And so there's a lot of possibilities in the types of textures you can use. Also, as you're selecting those furnishings and decorations for a room, think about how they feel and whether that will help with your design. Can make a big difference in how usable something might be. If you're looking at a wooden chair, a real rough feeling wooden chair maybe won't be very comfortable to sit in for a very long period of time. Or if you get a couch with a real rough feeling fabric, again, the comfort level may not be there. And then you have your visual texture. That's the texture you can see, but you can't feel. So in the picture, you have an artwork of a bunch of roses, and you know the rose petals would have that soft feeling to them, but you can't actually put your hand on the picture and feel that. A lot of times it's in photography. It could also be in the patterns of fabrics that you're using in your design. Now, as you're using texture in design, think about how it's used and what the room is going to be used for. Rough surfaces tend to have a more casual feel, so if you want a casual feeling room, that could be a helpful idea to think about. Smooth surfaces give it a room a more elegant feel. So if you think of polished wood or polished brass or a polished marble, you're going to have a more elegant feel with those types of textures. Polished stone or marble gives an elegance as well. It's a very sturdy, thick, strong stone, and so it can give that feeling of strength too. Heavy textures absorb more light, so it can make a room feel smaller. So if you have a small room, you may not want to use very heavy textured items in the room. Smooth textures are going to reflect more light, so it's going to make a room feel larger. So again, in a small room, you might want to look for more of those smoother surfaces that might have a little bit more of a shiny finish to it that will reflect the light and make the room feel larger. Too many kinds of textures can be distracting if there's all kinds of things going on. Again, texture-wise, it can take away from the design of the room. So those are the elements of design. We'll be looking at the elements of design here this week and talking a little bit more about using them in interior design. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, and I hope you have a wonderful day.